Welcome into a new 2-0 edition of the Going Deep Buffalo Show. I'm your host, Kevin Massare, here with Kevin Siracuse, as always, to break down a little bit of the Dolphins game. I know we're 6 days out from that, so we'll give some of our high-level takeaways from the game, as well as some of my advanced analytics that I want to talk about, and some of the great things that come out of that game. But then we have a great show here talking about the Jags. What does that mean? The 0-2 Jags coming to town with some interesting storylines around the Jags right now. They're 0-2 start. Their offense is struggling. Defense has played decent. Definitely some struggles there in Jacksonville. And we'll get on a special guest here shortly. One of our favorite friends of the show, Jared. He's going to break down, just like we had him on as a Panthers guy and a Jags guy. We're going to get him on here and momentarily to break down this game. But as always, this show is brought to you by the Summit Center, and also to Tom Golisano for donating $5 million to the Summit Center most recently yesterday. So that is greatly appreciated, him for thinking of the Summit Center and others for the best autism care in Western New York.
And tonight's show is also brought to you by Dave Dengler and the Larson-Timko Funeral Home in Fredonia. Larson-Timko Funeral Home offering 100% fully guaranteed price and pre-arranged funeral plans with live streaming available. You can give them a call at 716-679-9000 or visit their website at larsontimkofuneralhome.com.
There we have it. Thank you always to our show sponsors. But 2-0. The Bills are 2-0. And I would think that most of analysts, we had fans, we had a lot of people thinking the Bills may be 1-1 sitting here at this point. Definitely into a rocky stretch here coming up between Miami, then Jacksonville at home, who always seems to play the Bills well, into Baltimore, Houston, the Jets, into that stretch where people were talking about 2-3, 3-3, 2-4, and maybe the Bills are still the cream of the crop, already elevating to the top 3 in most depth charts on most power rankings. So that is cool to see. But smash that like button for us. A lot of cool things came out of the game last Thursday. We had our pregame show last week. Haven't had a chance to talk about the game, so we won't spend too much time, especially before we get Jared on to talk about the Jags. But a quick 10 minutes about the game. What great statistics that come out of there. Josh Allen is still an alien. His EPA is still off the charts, as well as some really cool defensive metrics. You got Jamarcus Ingram. You got Christian Benford being two of the best coverage corners at separation in the NFL. Christian Benford just came out as the #1 preventer of separation. He prevents it. He is truly becoming every bit as much as a cornerback one. And then what Jamarcus Ingram has been able to do from his spot. The defense looks mighty fine. I know they just lost another player in Terrell Bernard. Now you're going to miss Milano, Bernard, and Taron Johnson at least for 2 to 4 weeks between them all. And then obviously Milano much into early December for Milano to come back. So you're going to be missing those linebackers. Now you're going to get that Spectre, Dorian Williams. That is the backup linebacker core, Kevin, that they were hoping to have against the Chiefs in the playoffs. They had to go even a step down to a hurt Dodson, as well as AJ Klein off the RV. But this is the future backup linebackers, linebacker 3 and linebacker 4. How are you feeling about what transpired in Miami, how well the defense played? The offense didn't need to do too much. I guess sum it all up for us.
Normally I'd be a little bit intimidated and say, oh man, the Bills are missing the whole middle part of their defense between Milano, Bernard, and Taron Johnson. But because Sean McDermott is such a defensive mastermind, I almost feel like at ease. And I know Jacksonville is that classic trap game. The Bills always seem to lay an egg against Jacksonville. So I don't want to get overconfident here. But I really think that McDermott can scheme things up on defense, and you can kind of cover up those blemishes. And, there are so many stats that came out of this game. So I think the biggest stat here was, first of all, let me start from the macro point of view. And I tweeted after the game, the Bills were missing arguably their top 3 defenders in Milano, Bernard, and Johnson, and they still managed to hold the Dolphins to 10 points while forcing 3 turnovers. Now, looking at it from a micro point of view, this stat just absolutely blew my mind. I woke up Friday morning, and I was like, wait a sec. The Bills have played really well on defense, not only last night, but the last 2 weeks in general. And I was like, they held Marvin Harrison in check, and then Trey McBride too. So I was like, wait a sec. What are the stats here? So get this, Kevin. Between Marvin Harrison Jr., Trey McBride, Tyreek Hill, and Jalen Waddle, the Bills' defense have held those 4 receivers to a combined 13 receptions, 99 yards, and 0 touchdowns. They haven't even surpassed 100 yards, and those are 4 of the top receivers in the league. And I know it's early for Marvin Harrison Jr., but where he was drafted, he's projected to be a top target. Trey McBride, we know how good he can be from the tight end position. And with Miami's high-flying offense, the fact that McDermott could scheme those players up on defense, and someone like a Jamarcus Ingram and Cam Lewis are making game-changing plays and holding those 4 players in check over the last 2 weeks, I'm almost speechless.
Maybe, just maybe, something to take away from that, beside box score stats, even advanced stats, doesn't matter either way. Maybe they just know how to coach defense. Maybe this regime knows how to coach a defensive side of the ball. Like at some point, as you look through box score, as you look through advanced analytics and EPAs and Josh Allen 1 here, top of the right graph there, I said, any chart that comes out, you're going to have Josh Allen in the top right of that graph or the top left based on how the axis works and what the criteria is. He's going to be in the top metric box of whatever is the best category for the most part. But I think what's interesting is, to me, like, how much can an offensive coach really elevate Josh? We've seen Daboll leave him and fail. We've seen Dorsey really not do anything with that Cleveland offense so far. Like, obviously, Joe Brady's getting the most out of his offense right now. How much could an offensive coach elevate Josh? I don't know about much. He's already an elevation to the roster. He elevates everybody around him anyways, whether I'm calling plays or, who pick your favorite offensive coach, Bobby Slowick, or, pick your favorite offensive coach here, Ben Johnson. It doesn't really matter. Now, what you can take away is the combination of a defensive coach and what they're able to do in the midst of those kind of injuries. Like, I don't even want to know if the Bills had those kind of injuries with an offensive head coach, with maybe a defensive coordinator who wasn't as versatile as McDermott. The Bills mix coverages more than anybody in the NFL. Them and the Chiefs, Spagnuolo, being a former coach himself and being just proven to be a really great defensive coordinator. That's one thing, as compared to other defensive coaches like Vic Fangio, who I just don't think have it anymore. But you look at what McDermott's being able to do in disguise coverages toward the best of the league. His versatility and what he's able to call is just confusing. You would think that Tua is just overthrowing you. Tua does not overly commit turnovers. It's not like his big problem in life. He is so confused when he plays Sean McDermott. It's ridiculous. He doesn't know where receivers are going. He doesn't know what coverage they're in. Receivers are running wrong routes. You saw it. Wasn't just a one-game thing. You saw it last year when he threw the pick. It wasn't a great route at all, but he threw a pick last year to lose the AFC East Championship game in Week 18. It's the same thing. The coverage is strong, and McDermott just maybe knows how to coach a defense, whether it's Jamarcus Ingram. He picks his players, and I've said this a couple of times. Jamarcus Ingram was an average to below average mid-major college football player. I covered UB and said at the time, like, yeesh, I didn't think he had a Sunday future, let alone, like, I didn't think he had much of a Saturday future. There was times when I was like, he may need to be off the field. Like, he is not covering anybody. But you put him in the right situation with the right coaching staff, with that raw talent that he has. He's a great coverage guy. Absolutely shocking to me to see his development. He spent some time on the practice squad. He showed that he could do it in Miami a couple of years ago in that real heat game that I was like, okay, he's covering Hill a little bit here. That's pretty impressive. And then he carries that, basically running the route for Tyreek Hill in the end zone when Skylar Thompson had came in. It was just totally an impressive performance by these DBs. And they just have a wealth of players who can play in this scheme. It is good to see. I think the combination has been great, what McDermott has put together on this field. How are you feeling overall defensively? Like, and this is like, you're getting Taron Johnson and Bernard back probably in 3 or 4 weeks. And like, there's just a plethora of talent here. Like, I mean, how are you feeling? Then you got the D-line that's dominating. They're winning across the field. You got Rousseau and Von Miller in the top 10 of all pass rushing metrics. There's a lot of good to take away from that.
Yeah, there really is. And I know the Bills have a tough stretch coming up here, as you alluded to, between Baltimore, Houston, and the Jets, all on the road. And not to mention the Jaguars aren't going to be a slouch. But again, I just keep coming back to McDermott, because you have Josh Allen on offense, you have Sean McDermott on defense, and the way that he can just figure out how to deploy someone like a Jamarcus Ingram in these dime packages to, like you said, just absolutely confuse opposing quarterbacks like Tua, it's just incredible. Because Ingram was just a UDFA, and McDermott can make him look like an all-pro. So basically, if you're unfamiliar, that dime package is an extra DB. So essentially, the Bills will take Dorian Williams off the field and replace him with Jamarcus Ingram as that extra defensive back because Williams can be a liability in coverage. So they put Ingram back there, and it just looks like a match made in heaven. Not to mention, as I already said, Cam Lewis, Balin Spector. I know he didn't cover Achane out in the flat, but I thought he settled in very nicely. And it's just really, really impressive what Sean McDermott can do with this defense. And before we get Jared on here, I just got to say this about Josh Allen and the offense, because I think this is very symbolic too. He only had 141 total yards. He threw for 139, only ran 2 times for 2 yards. And the fact that the Bills can win in that dominant of a fashion and Josh didn't have to be Superman, I think that says a lot.
Yeah, and to kind of cap that point off, Christian Benford is one of the number 1 rated DVOA players at cornerback position. Cornerback 1 so far through with Reek Woolen. Kyler Gordon's played some really good football. Witherspoon from Seattle, Jordan Lewis from Dallas. Those are the top of the cornerback DVOA spectrum per Aaron Schatz, and our friend of the show, who we had on last week, is calling him one of the best corners in the league. So remember, Christian Benford is just continuing to play such top-notch football. It's crazy, but it's time to go ahead, Kevin.
I just want to say, we kind of forget about Benford sometimes because he's so established and he's playing so well, but he was a 6th-round pick out of an FCS school in Villanova, a complete underdog who, again, gets in this system with McDermott and now Babbage with McDermott's tutelage. And Benford, again, looks like an all-pro. And the metrics that come out on him and the stats, Benford is one of those top corners in the league. You pair him up with Rasul Douglas, and that looks like another match made in heaven. And one other stat that I want to say real quick is that Von Miller getting the quarterback in less than 2.5 seconds, that's the fastest time that he's had since 2021. So it seems like everything's coming together. I know the Bills are trying to piece it together with these injuries, but if they can hold the fort down, give it 3-4 weeks, hopefully get the middle of that defense back, at least in Bernard and Johnson. You look forward to hopefully a healthy Matt Milano late November, early December. I'm liking what this team is looking like.
And it's time to talk Jags. We got a little bit Dolphins. We'll maybe tackle a little bit more at the end of the show and what that means for the Dolphins and the AFC East. We'll see if the Bills have a 5th year in a row, what this division and what this could all amount to. But we have to talk Jags. There is a game here shortly. It's time to bring on friend of the show, Jared Feinberg, who's from not only Panthers Wire, who we had on in preseason, but also now with our guy over there at Jags Wire. Jared, appreciate you coming on the show. How's it feel to be covering the Jags now?
Oh, you're muted, Jared.
Hello, gents. Can you guys hear me now?
We got you now.
Cool. Awesome. It's been great, writing for both sides, getting insight on both teams. It's been really fun. So, of course, first couple games for both teams, not so great. Both teams 0-2, but hopefully at some point, at least the Jaguars will at least find a win on their schedule at some point.
Yeah, certainly. Now, when you look at kind of interesting stories here coming out of Jacksonville, I certainly, they probably, we've seen this Dolphins team, they've seen this Dolphins team, and it probably was a W in my opinion with that Travis Etienne fumble. Really cost them, to me, which was probably, and most AFC East fans were rooting for the Jags. Certainly that, the Dolphins are always supposed to be in contention. They're always be a playoff contender. And they always seem to scrape by games like that. But what's going on in Jacksonville? 0-2. They've got it. There's some metrics coming out of there that don't pour, but there's definitely some concerning things around the O-line. So kind of recap the first 2 games for us from your perspective.
Oh, it's been a mess. It's been a mess in terms of offensive philosophy, identity, lack of discipline and fundamentals, misassignments, costly timeouts, or just taking timeouts at the worst time just because you're either not set, play clock's going down, or there's simply just a lack of communication, especially in situational football. This has been an issue since last season, probably past halfway of last season when the Jaguars were kind of on the come up. They started 8-4, looked like a legitimate playoff team, and then they absolutely collapsed. And this is simply what's happening with Jacksonville right now, is a continuation of last year. Now, what does this entail for the rest of the season? Well, this is a Jags team under Doug Peterson that's always been hot and cold. We saw that in 2021 under Doug Peterson in his first season. We saw it early last year. And right now, they're still very stone cold. And it's frustrating if you're a Jags fan to watch this offense, to watch this team with a defense that's arguably top 10 to continue to have these incredible mistakes. Sometimes both sides of the ball, but mainly on the offensive side of the ball. So this is starting to become I would probably say this is starting to become a Doug Peterson, Press Taylor issue. So the Jaguars have a lot to work on, and it really couldn't come at a worse time when they have a very tough schedule to start their season, playing on the road against Miami, hosting the Browns. Then, of course, this coming Monday night against the Buffalo Bills in Buffalo. Then they have Houston on their schedule as well on the road. So they're going to need to figure things out very quickly, or it could get very rough to start the season, and there may not be correcting going forward.
So when you look at what the Jags have come, and I pulled some data, and one thing that stuck out to me, talk to me about their O-line. So I've seen some issues with Cam Robinson. I've seen, I guess, they're allowing 0.9, so they're at the bottom of the list, 0.9 yards before contact toward the running back. And it's been an issue. Like I've seen some players being called to get benched, and it does seem like one of their biggest kind of problems right now on their roster. Is that accurate? Well, I mean, I know Cleveland's a very good defensive team. I wouldn't call Miami a gauntlet on the defensive line by any stretch, especially after losing Christian Wilkins and a few others. What can you say is happening on that Jags O-line that's been causing them so much problem?
There's, like I said earlier, there's communication issues. There's missed assignments in terms of blocking assignments. I wrote an article in All 22 Review today of some of the Jaguars' issues pertaining to a goal-to-go sequence where their offensive line was very hit or miss. Good protection at times, and then, of course, it starts to crumble downhill. Ezra Cleveland did not have a good game against the Browns. He did not whatsoever. Neither did Mitch Morse. There was on the first goal line play. So beforehand, Trevor Lawrence had like a nice 33-yard scramble, got him 2 yards before the goal line, first and goal at the 2-yard line. And then, it sounds like comments are saying I'm not loud enough.
I can hear you.
You hear me? Cool. Back to my point. The Jags had first and goal at the 2-yard line, had to take a timeout because of the delay of game, but that was not on film, which Zach Goodell and I were looking at, and we were like, that seems a little bit odd. Usually they have those timeouts available to see on film, on NFL Pro, on even Game Pass. So it was kind of odd, but at the same time, you look at the end zone clip and you see Mitch Morse not climbing to the second level fast enough, and then Ezra Cleveland just kind of grazes Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, who just blasts through the A gap to tackle ETN for a loss. Then the offensive line had some issues on the preceding plays. It's just a mess right now. It kind of encapsulates the issues of this football team right now. And it's failing what is a top 10 defense at the moment. The Jaguars have an offensive line issue. Cleveland has his good moments. He definitely has his bad. Cam Robinson, it's time. It's time. I think at the end of the season, it's time. But this team is still run by Trent Baalke. I don't know how that's going to play out in terms of whether he returns next year. Jaguars fans for the better of the last probably 3 years have want Baalke gone from this team because of the additions he has made, some of the expensive additions he has made. And I think there are a lot of Jaguars fans who are expecting playoffs from this team, which still has plenty of talent on both sides of the ball. they want playoffs, and they're not getting it because of the inconsistencies from the offensive side of the ball, coaching staff, Doug Peterson, Trent Balick. So it's a mess all the way around.
Jared, I want to go position by position here. So I guess we'll start with Trevor Lawrence because everything kind of starts with the quarterback position. So these are the stats that I found. NFL on CBS tweeted these out the other day. Over his last 7 starts, 1,652 yards, 10 passing touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and an 81.9 passer rating. But the biggest stat is that he is 0-7. So I guess starting with Lawrence, is this more of a Trevor Lawrence problem, or is it just the whole offense as a whole? Is it coaching? Like, what are the issues stemming from here?
It's a little bit of all. Basically, the answer is all the above. Trevor Lawrence, he definitely had his good moments. He had a great second half against the Dolphins in week 1. In that first half, he was making some incredible throws down the field to the middle of the field, intermediate. He had that touchdown throw to Brian Thomas Jr., which was beautiful. And you look at that and you're like, that is what the Jaguars offense can become. And they have gotten so conservative in terms of what they want to do. Play action wise, they've been successful somewhat off play action from under center to allow that offensive line to kind of hide their weaknesses some, while also allowing Trevor Lawrence to work off platform and allow players to be schemed open. But it's still not working out, and it's mostly from coaching. But Lawrence himself has admitted to his mistakes over the last 2 weeks, especially this past week. So Lawrence, we know he's a gunslinger. We know how talented he is. We know he can be very, very good overall. He could be arguably a top 5, top 3 quarterback if he really wanted to put it together. But with Trevor, you're getting someone that right now he currently is generating his lowest completion percentage over expectation at negative 11.2%. Or no, excuse me, that is incorrect. Is that negative? Wait, just looking at my notes real quick. It was this past weekend where he did generate that low completion percentage above expectations. He's currently 3rd worst in terms of completion percentage over or above expectation at 10.7, at negative 10.7, while of course Josh Allen, his opponent for this coming weekend or this coming Monday night, is at 3.2, positive 3.2. So he also has the 7th worst quarterback pressure percentage at 37.7%. It's a little bit on him. It's a little bit on the offensive line. It's a little bit coaching. It's all of it. And so you got to wonder if this offense is going to improve, if this offense is going to finally figure out an identity. And I feel like once they do, I think this offense will start to churn. This team will start to get hot. But again, you're really putting more pressure on the defense to make more plays. And funny enough, it's kind of reminding me some of what the Carolina Panthers were like last year. And this is not to say that the Jaguars are going to turn into the 2023 Carolina Panthers. Absolutely not. They are a much better football team than that. And arguably probably a better coaching staff. As crazy enough is it to say, they do. But with the Jaguars, with Trevor, it's hot and cold. You got to figure it out long term. But right now, I think they're just going through the growing pains of just everything, top to bottom. It'll work out, but right now it doesn't look great.
We got the offensive series results here, which I find very fascinating. Their touchdown percentage is down. Obviously, they're converting at first down, and the Jags are at 60%, which is pretty low. You continue going down the stretch field goal rate's fine. Punting 17% is pretty high, and then obviously turning it over is not terrible either at 6%. It's really that touchdown rate. They're just struggling inside but what looks to be inside the 20s right now, based on their drive chart. They're getting field goals, which would be great at times, but they're just not converting touchdowns. And then, I've read a lot about Christian Kirk, one of my favorite players. one that is said to have been wanted by Josh Allen pretty heavily. It can always be a trade target for the Bills down the road whenever Jacksonville would feel like they want to move on from him. But he doesn't seem to be playing great football either, which has been interesting. And then, to kind of cap your point off about, CPOE, Trevor Lawrence was 0.2 negative against the Dolphins in that specific performance. But later on last week, negative 9.2 against the Browns. He wasn't playing very good football. He wasn't seeing the field. He was expected to complete 9% more of completions percentage. That's a challenging day. You're right. He didn't play terrible against the Dolphins. The advanced analytics there will say he played pretty decent. But against the Browns, who are known to be a very good defense and great at times, good to great, he played pretty poorly. The team, played well down the stretch. It looks like they ran the ball better in the second half, according to their metrics, 0.51 late rush EPA, but just could not get anything going on late downs, third and fourth down, negative 0.1 in totality in third and fourth down. You're not going to win many football games as you start to get in negatives on third and fourth downs. So I'm guessing that's a culmination of some of the issues going on there now. But one thing I wanted to ask you, summing that all up, are they playing desperate football? Are they going to come here ready to play? Because that's, I would say, the Bills fans' biggest fear. They can't go to 0-3 with Houston on deck. Like, it's just a death sentence almost. So are they going to, and then obviously you're playing a good opponent on Monday Night Football. They're going to be up for this football game and prove that they can at least compete in the AFC at least a little bit by maybe taking down what could be considered a top 3 AFC team at this point. Is that kind of how Jacksonville's looking at it? Because going to 0-3 is probably not much of an option for anyone, but especially this Jags team.
Yeah, so Trevor Lawrence and company are going to Buffalo this weekend. I think this team it's hard to tell what this team is going to do right out of the gate because, of course, they came out flat last week, and it resulted in what we saw this past weekend where they were down 10-0, and then they were down, I believe, 16-3 at one point. And then, of course, had the first half lead against Miami, and then they came out flat and just played conservative football right after that ETN fumble in the second half. So you really don't know what type of team you're going to get with the Jaguars this coming Monday night. You're either going to get the hot Jaguars team that we remember from 2022 and first half of 2023, but at the same time, you could also get last week's Jaguars. I mean, it is so hard to tell and predict what this team is going to do going forward. I have very little trust right now in terms of continuity, communication issues, just all the above, because it's remained an issue since last season. I do want to preface that the Jaguars do understand this is a very crucial game early in the season. Now that they're 0-2, they know that if they go down 0-3, they're going to be in a very tough spot in terms of making the playoffs just in general this season. Not a lot of teams who start 0-3 tend to make the playoffs. So Jacksonville is in a must-win situation this coming weekend against the Buffalo Bills. But I will say this. Ryan Nielsen, defensive coordinator, has this defense playing excellent football outside of a couple guys that are out for a few weeks. Tyson Campbell, I believe, is on injury reserve from what I remember due to a hamstring injury. He's going to be out for at least 4 weeks, so he will not be available this week. And then, of course, it's that front seven. That's probably going to be the biggest challenge for Buffalo, because that front seven has been playing excellent football. Secondary's been playing very competitive without Tyson Campbell. It's going to be a very fun unit to watch this season, but unfortunately, they have an offense that still has not figured itself out. So Buffalo's going to be in for, or especially their offense, they're going to be in for a challenge against Jaguars defense this coming season or this coming Monday night.
Jared, before we switch over to the defense, I want to talk about more of the skill position players on offense. So if we could just hit them all real quick. I mainly want to talk about the wide receivers, but I saw someone in the comments talk about ETN, and I'm kind of wondering about that too. So what's going on with Etienne, and then Tank Bigsby, excuse me. I believe he had 12 rushes for 73 yards in the opener. Then I think he was ruled doubtful with the shoulder injuries. He got injured on a kickoff, and then he came back in the game, right?
Yeah, he did. And I haven't seen the injury report yet for Jacksonville, but I would think that Bigsby could be questionable this coming weekend. But we'll have to keep an eye on that throughout the rest of the week. But what I will say is that Travis Etienne, I think he's had a really solid season so far. I think that fumble, I think a lot of people are still looking at that like maybe Etienne's still trying to get his footing going again. But I think with Etienne, if Jacksonville really wants to commit to it, I think they could commit to a good ground game. I think the offensive line has shown moments where they can generate movement at the line of scrimmage, where they can get that extra yards after contact with Etienne, with Bigsby. Bigsby's a nice change of pace back. Etienne is more their just all-around back overall. With Etienne, you need to lean on him a little bit more going forward. It can't be just outside of your playmakers, because I think Brian Thomas is still a little bit unproven, even though he has shown the talent. Hey, this kid could play, could really, really play. And I do want to talk about Brian Thomas real quick.
I was going to ask about him, so yeah, go ahead.
Brian Thomas is likely going to be this team's wide receiver 1 by the end of the season, if not by mid-season. Especially if he's able to get more targets, especially down the field, intermediate. He's still developing a little bit as a route runner. I think he had a limited route tree coming out of LSU, and he's still kind of adjusting to that full route tree that he has to run at this level of play. So you see some of the moments there, see some communication issues as well. There was an issue on the second to last or the next to last drive of the first half, where I don't believe Thomas got his head around quickly enough, and the ball was almost intercepted. However, looking at it a second time, that ball was actually tipped, but Thomas again needs to get his head around more quickly and be able to be in a position to make a play on the ball, because that ball was nearly intercepted. But anyways, Thomas is a very talented receiver, very talented deep threat guy who I think could really stress the Bills defense this coming Monday night. And Thomas is someone that could end up being a top receiver, or at least a top 20 or top 15 receiver in this league in very short time. Jacksonville has a good one in Brian Thomas, but Gabe Davis, Christian Kirk, solid weapons. I wouldn't say they're game changers, but they have been very solid contributors to this point. Evan Ingram did not play this past weekend, of course, due to a hamstring injury in pregame. So still unsure of his status for this weekend, but he is an integral part of this offense. He is someone that you're going to see lined up at fullback, especially when they go I formation or an offset I. You're going to see him running routes out of the backfield. You're going to see him really more motioned to the perimeter as a move F tight end. Luke Farrell is more of their inline tight end in this offense. You're not seeing a ton of Evan Ingram in line, because it seems like Doug is finally figuring out, okay, we need this guy more so all over the place, all over the formation, different alignments, to create mismatches and create matchups that we like as well. So that's something that the Jaguars could be missing over the next couple of weeks, especially if his hamstring injury is more severe than we realize. Again, I haven't seen the injury report for practice. I'll take a look at that after this. But from what I understand, he is likely to be questionable. If not, he may not play this weekend. So losing Evan Ingram last week definitely hurt them, and I think it's going to hurt them moving forward, especially if the hamstring injury is more severe than expected.
I was a big Brian Thomas guy because the Bills obviously needed a wide receiver going into the season. So I was saying either trade up for Brian Thomas, because in a mock draft, I was like, if you trade up with Philly at 22, I think that's a solid spot because they had the extra second round pick from the Diggs trade. Because to be honest, I really didn't think at first that Jacksonville would take him, but I figured he would go within that range of like 23 to 28. And you guys picked what, 23, 24?
I think it was 24. No, we picked much earlier than that, 17, I believe.
No, did you take him 17th? Because
yeah, we took him 17 because they didn't make the playoffs last year, so they took him at 17. Well, actually,
I think it was 23 because Philly was 22.
have to double check on that. Yeah,
because I remember saying if you would have taken my mock draft, you trade up with the Eagles at 22, you could have taken BTJ right before the Jaguars got him at 23, 24, one of those two. But ultimately, the Bills got Keon Coleman, and I really like what I've seen from Coleman so far. But I was just curious to see how that's going with Brian Thomas because I agree. I think he can be a top wide receiver once he gets a little bit more polished. Gabe Davis, Kevin and I, and the rest of Bills Mafia, I mean, we know what he brings to the table. Very inconsistent, boom or bust, but it seems like he's been pretty well for you, like playing pretty well so far for you guys. I think the leading receiver, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Yeah, and you're both right because the Jags did have pick 17. They traded down
back. That's right.
to 23.
I forgot about that.
And where they selected.
So this
Brian
is
Thomas
me
Jr.
still learning as a new Jags beat reporter.
Don't forget, Jared is a native Panthers fan,
Panthers guy.
but covers the Jags. So I like to have his unbiased opinion too, because now we're not getting, not that you would about the Panthers, but we're getting a really unbiased, realistic view. Sometimes when we get on people that are very we even get on pretty high level media guys for different teams, and they're very, very pro. You can't even get out of what's the actual truth going on out of that roster because it's the Dolphins are going to win. Tua's great. And it's and not literally, but that is somewhat of what you hear. But what's great about you is that you have that Panthers background, but you can actually give the Jags as they are rather than from a fan perspective of, the Jags are going to be the best. Travis Etienne's the world's best running back. You can actually give it from what you've seen so far in the first 2 weeks. So definitely a really appreciated mindset coming out of that. But yeah, to the point of Gabe Davis, he's going to have boomer bust days. He's going to have those 4 catches, 4 touchdown games. He's going to have those 15 targets with only 3 catches, and he's going to struggle. It's just who he is. I don't think he's going to change that. It's just who you get from Gabe Davis, but it does seem to be a fit in the offense so far. As I'd expect, he was handpicked by Jacksonville and they paid him to be what they're looking for. But Christian Kirk had a negative 0.8 EPA, one of the worst I've ever seen from the receiver position.
He only had 1 catch for negative 1 yard, and it was on that specific drive I did a film analysis on. So it's I really don't know what's going on with this Jaguars offense. And to be very clear, I am a huge fan of Trevor Lawrence. I think he will and be a great quarterback in this league going forward. I mean, he just got paid $55 million a year. So he is someone that is going to be in Jacksonville long term and maybe someday lead that team to a Super Bowl if they can get by the Kansas City Chiefs. But what Trevor Lawrence brings is great, but also there are the flaws that just drives you crazy sometimes. He does have that gunslinger mentality, but we don't know what we're going to get from Trevor Lawrence this coming Monday night. We could get the Trevor Lawrence that everyone expects to see, and he could go off for 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, great EPA, great CPOE. He could just have an insane game this coming Monday night, or he could just flatline like he has or like he did this past weekend. So, you're not really sure what you're going to get from Trevor Lawrence. I still believe he is a top 10 quarterback in this league, but he is, certainly not on the level of Josh Allen, not at all. But man, this is a team that I'm a little concerned about going forward. But to the skill positions, that this is a team that could really use a true number 1 receiver. And sure, Brian Thomas will likely develop into that, but they need a legitimate playmaker that will just stress defenses everywhere. I was really holding out hope the Jaguars could go after Brandon Ayuk. I believe it was rumored at one point they were going after him, but of course the Steelers were in on him before he signed that contract extension. But Jaguars are a team that just doesn't. I don't know. And also that comment, is Press Taylor making the offensive play calls, or is Peterson doing it? Listen, Zach and I have been trying to figure that out the last 2 weeks. There's really nothing that has shown who is calling the plays, whether it's Press, whether it's Doug. Again, I'm going to keep sounding like a broken record. The Jaguars team is a mess. This Jacksonville Jaguars team is a mess. No one knows what's going on, really. So it is very frustrating for Jaguars fans. I'm sure anyone that covers Jaguars, to see this team continue to play hot and cold football. At some point, changes have got to be made, whether it's drastic or it's something small, but able to get this offense in rhythm again.
Some of the answers may be here on your screen with their tackle play. Cam Robinson right now is allowing close to 8% pressure percentage allowed, and blown block percentage is up where about 8% as well for him. But then you see Anton Harrison really struggling around the 13 to 14% and about 12% in blown block percentage. I don't know what quarterback, even Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, are going to be successful with that tackle play, at least through 2 weeks. And then conversely, you see Deion Dawkins and Spencer Brown on the other side of it, approaching around the 3% and 0% blown block. They have 0% on the axis of 0% for blown block rate, and only allowing close to about 2 to 3% each in pressure rate. So that's the drastic difference right now in tackle positions, and that's definitely going to affect your entire offense. There's some say right there, and we've talked about the offensive line a little bit to start the show. But it gets ugly if this is what it's looking like. You're talking about a 10% pressure rate from Anton Harrison and a close to 7 or 8% from Cam Robinson. That is way too much pressure, and how well Greg Rousseau and Von Miller have played. It's definitely going to be a challenge to help them out. And then to the weapons point, before we get to the defense of Jacksonville, Evan Ingram is said to be week to week with that hamstring by Doug Peterson. And they said it was similar to the Tyson Campbell injury, who's now on IR for 4 weeks. So I don't believe it'll be a 4-week thing for him, but it isn't likely that he plays, and at least at the very best for him, a limited fashion, maybe a decoy, maybe certain receiving packages. But it's looking like a week-to-week scenario, and Evan Ingram's one of the tight ends I think still, to me, will fall in the top 10 tight ends right now. And in my opinion, I think he's talented. I think he's that good when he's going. So I think it is a loss. You can't lose a player like that an hour before kickoff. Like the Bills, if they lost Dalton Kincaid and he hasn't produced at a super high level yet on the offensive stats-wise, it's just part of the game plan. He was fully part of the Bills' game plan against the Dolphins. They didn't need to utilize him based on how well their defense played. But it is just a pivotal loss to your offense to lose someone who probably was a big part of the game plan during pregame. That's just unfortunate. Like that's something that would happen to the Bills. That's just unfortunate circumstances to lose probably a weapon that you had pegged in that Cleveland game.
Do you remember 2021 when Carolina came into Buffalo? Their kicker got hurt.
I do remember
in
that.
pregame, and then that was one of Cam Newton's last starts as a Panther in his second tenure. But like to your point, just having that type of luck or bad luck where one of your top players gets hurt in pregame, that is like you can't imagine that for any team. Like if that happened, like say Josh Allen somehow had an injury before the game this coming weekend, that changes everything. I
don't even want to think about that.
It's like saying go Trevor Lawrence too. You just can't predict these things, and it's unfortunate now Jacksonville is having to deal with this injury of Evan Ingram, to where they could be without one of their more versatile pieces on offense for at least this coming week or even weeks to come, depending on the.
And what do you mean? You got Mac Jones? Like, come on, everyone wants to see Mac Jones. Come on.
No
one knows Mac Jones better than Bills fans
on the field whatsoever. I very much pass on that. I've been all the way out on Mac Jones. I kind of understood the trade acquisition, but at the same time, I'm like, what chance does he really give you? You know, like
Not much.
Like you two know the Mac Jones experience from playing New England 2 times a year.
Yep.
You know, Jones is who he is. We're not going to go. We're not going to go there. I hope we don't go there.
The only fairness is Trubisky is going to be the same. So ultimately, I don't know who many teams that do have that luxury.
Yeah.
Jared, I have one more thing about the offense before we switch over to the defense. So when we're talking about the weapons here, I'm thinking about Brian Thomas, and then I'm reading the comments, and I agree with people that the Bills secondary is playing lights out right now. And I think that Rasul Douglas and Christian Benford can essentially lock up Brian Thomas Jr., who, again, yeah, he looks promising, but he's pretty raw. I think McDermott will be able to outcoach that. And Gabe Davis, he's pretty much a one-trick pony, and I think that the Bills will know how to defend that. And again, I'm confident with these DBs. So I think the X factor here is Christian Kirk, because the Bills are missing that whole middle of their defense between Matt Milano, Terrell Bernard, and Taron Johnson. So for you guys, if I'm Press Taylor, I think this has to be the Christian Kirk breakout game. Try to live in the middle of the field and try to really test a guy like Dorian Williams or Balin Spector, Jamarcus Ingram, who the Bills have been deploying in dime coverages. So would you agree? Would this be the week to try to get Kirk going?
Yes, absolutely. Christian Kirk is an integral part of this offense. And the fact that we haven't seen enough of him this season is concerning. So, you have to take advantage of the matchups that are presented with each opponent. And this weekend, Christian Kirk has a favorable matchup against the Buffalo Bills because of where he plays. He's mainly a slot receiver for this team, but also you get a guy that can terrorize the middle of the field, especially with 2 linebackers or especially a second level for Buffalo that is dealing with injuries and is without their star linebacker for the rest of the year. So you got to take advantage of those matchups. And I really do hope Doug Peterson takes advantage of it, or Press Taylor, whoever's calling the plays, because if there's a time that Jacksonville needs Christian Kirk to step up in a must-win game, it's right now. It's this weekend in Buffalo, and Christian Kirk needs to have that good game for where the Jaguars can be more successful offensively. But again, we just don't know, because we don't know what type of Jacksonville team we're going to get this coming weekend. We could get the team that got to the second round 2 years ago. We could get a team that lost 7 of the last 8 games. Or not 7 of the last 8 games, but more so 5, 6 of their last 7 games. It was just awful last season. So we really don't know what type of Bills team we're going to get. Again, I sound like a broken record, but it's the truth. Jacksonville's just an unpredictable team at this point.
For sure. Christian Kirk is someone that can beat the zone. He has beaten the Bill zone in the past in London.
Yeah.
Him and Ingram have done really well against this Sean McDermott defense. To Kevin's point, this specific matchup, Gabe Davis wouldn't scare me for what the Bills do. And Brian Thomas, with their ability to lock down Marvin Harrison Jr. in week 1, the Bills will be prepared for those 2 receivers. They're not the skill set the Bills need to worry about. But Ingram and very much so Christian Kirk are 2 guys who have done it before, who have beat the Sean McDermott defense. And I think that missing Ingram is going to be tough if he is out. And then Christian Kirk has to get going, or I think it's going to be a long day. But if they can get him going, he is somebody that has beaten McDermott in the past with how his smooth route running and his ability to find those soft zone. And if he's not doing that, it's gonna be challenging. And then ETN, someone asked, how is ETN out of the backfield? Actually, very good. 41 receiving snaps. He's been pretty successful in those to 25 rushing snaps. So he's actually known as a pretty solid receiver. Part of why I wanted the Bills to draft him right before the Jags took him right in front of the Bills a few years back. So that's definitely a player that the Bills are going to need to be careful with.
And he certainly progressed as a receiver the last couple of years. And as someone who has a significant interest in the Clemson Tigers and Clemson Tigers football, just FYI, and maybe a little hint of why I have such high praise for Trevor Lawrence. ETN, from his time at Clemson to now, is a totally different receiver, and that's great to see, and that's great for Jacksonville. but they need to figure out what are you going to do with ETN going forward in this offense. What is your plan? What is your identity? Is ETN going to be your identity, or is Trevor Lawrence going to be your identity? We just don't know at this point. But ETN is someone that I think Buffalo really needs to harp on and be like, this guy is going to be a threat. He knows how to win the edges, and he can get down the sideline with some crazy bursts. That burst that he had at Clemson is still there. Even after the Liz Frank injury, that burst is still there, and he is still as dangerous as ever as a running back. So he will be a factor this coming weekend.
Clemson Tigers fan, I'm going to assume then.
Yeah, I'm a little frustrated with Dabo, but I mean, who isn't at this point? So
true. I think it's time, though. We appreciate all of our show sponsors. Smash that like button. We got Larson-Timko Funeral Home. We got the Summit Center and the large donation, $5 million from Tom Golisano to the Summit Center just recently as of yesterday. So that was huge news in the Western New York community to support autism care. But Jared, defense time. We spent a lot of time, and rightfully so, talking about Trevor Lawrence, a little bit of the O-line and some of their issues there, the weapon base. We got to talk about the Jacksonville defense and how it's been playing well. You mentioned that even though missing Tyson Campbell, one of my a really strong corner in my opinion, missing him I thought would be a pretty big deal. And it's shown flashes to have some separation issues according to some advanced metrics, but that doesn't tell the complete story of how the Jacksonville defense has played. Talk to us a little bit. Give us the breakdown of what's going on right now. I think Devin Lloyd's playing some extremely high level football. Break down what we've been seeing here from obviously all of the defense, but Josh Hines-Allen as well, a guy that has been known to take it personal when he plays Josh Allen, and has played some of his best football games actually against Josh Allen.
Josh Allen is now Josh Hines-Allen. I hope he still can take that game, that notion of he is still Josh Allen personally, but I think he wanted to change that name just for that. But anyways, something I noticed on Next Gen Stats, Allen in the first half against Cleveland, he only had one pressure and a sack across 11 pass rush reps in the first half against Cleveland. And then the second half, 4 pressures on 17 pass rushes. He was a lot better in the second half. But to your point, Josh Hines-Allen is a phenomenal pass rusher, and Trevin Walker is getting there. He had a great first game. He was getting pressure on Tua, and last week he flashed a good amount. As a former number 1 overall pick, he has developed nicely over the last couple of seasons. And I think this is the year we finally see that breakout, and you can start to see it happening in front of your eyes. Walker's been a good run defender. He's also been a good pass rusher so far this season. The second level, and just overall the secondary as well, even with their injuries, they've been very disciplined. And I want to point the Miami game because Miami does such a great job at getting defenses to bite on eye candy, those motions, shifts, all the creative stuff they do, all the stuff Mike McDaniel does. Mike McDaniel does. That defense basically shut down Miami's offense outside of 2 big-time explosive plays from Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. They were all over the motions. They were all over the screens. Their second-level defenders were disciplined. Olakun, Lloyd, Muma had it in his limited reps. I mean, this defense is fun to watch. Bills offense. Bills offense is going to have a pretty good test against this defense. I do expect Joe Brady to bring his A game because as someone that experienced Joe Brady's first year or two in Carolina as offensive coordinator, this is a guy that he's gonna find ways to get get Jacksonville's defense a little bit off balance. But I'll say this: Ronald Darby, Montrick Brown, Jerrion Jones, they have stepped up big time, especially in the absence of Tyson Campbell. So I've been very, very excited about that. And just overall, this defensive line, this is a type of defensive line that can get pressure on just 4-man rushes alone. They don't need to blitz the quarterback 20 times a game. You can blitz him 4 times and allow your front four to get pressure. And that is one of the gifts of having a 4-3 defense is you can get pressure consistently with that type of front. So Hines Allen, Walker, Eric Armstead, who has had, of course, reps at the 5 technique or at the 7 technique, as well as the 3 tech as that versatile defensive lineman, and then Devon Hamilton as your nose tackle. This is a very stout defense, one that is disciplined, one that will not allow many explosive plays. So if you're expecting something like the last 2 weeks, if you're a Bills fan, those explosive plays could be limited to a minimum this coming weekend.
You see here Jacksonville's propensity to play man defense, and that's going to be a challenge against Josh Allen. So do they play it? Or do they go against what seems to be 63%? Wow. Is that something that you anticipate to continue, Jared? You see the Bills at the top, one of the best at disguising coverages underneath Sean McDermott, 20% man, 69% too high. They disguise cover 2, cover 4, cover 6. They run it all. But running a primarily man-heavy scheme, cover 1, and 53% of the time in cover 1. Josh Allen's really good against cover 1. Do they break habit to or do they go with what they're best at? Bill Belichick would be known to run whatever he wanted to run, regardless what he thought that Josh Allen would be. He played man a lot against Josh, unsuccessfully throughout the later tenure, but still ran it. Is that what you expect from Jacksonville? Because that is a coverage Josh Allen is very known to beat, and they're running extremely well out of too high anyways. What do you expect the defense to do here? As we will bring this up one more time, 63% in man, 41% in too high, two different formations that they beat pretty heavily. What do you expect Jacksonville to counter here with? Are they going to run that, cover 1 a lot? What's going to happen?
I think you'll see plenty of that cover 1 this coming weekend. I think Nielsen is someone that is going to go with what he thinks works, and he's going to continue to play what's been successful. Has been his man-to-man coverage. And of course, you see on the screen here, 63% man rate, and 53% cover 1 rate. And you see that on film too. It's been very impressive to watch this defense continue to stay disciplined in their assignments, their man-to-man assignments, and not give up explosive plays. So that's one of the big reasons why Jacksonville has been so successful defensively to start the year. And I don't expect them to go off of that. I'd be kind of surprised if they went to a more balanced zone and man coverage system. But it's hard for me to imagine Coach Nielsen going to some zone, or especially a little bit more zone against Josh Allen, maybe some quarterback contain a little bit, but I don't expect him to get off that man coverage mindset. This team is going to ride. It seems like a team that's going to ride or die on man coverage this coming season. And so far they've been successful, and they haven't been able to no one's really been able to stop this. They've had some mobile. Watson was more their tougher challenge to start the year, but of course Watson's who he is as a quarterback now, off field stuff aside. But this will be one of their tougher matchups of the year. Josh Allen in Buffalo against him. This is as tough as it gets for this defense. So I do expect them to be on their A game, but I think this is the type of matchup that they're going to miss Tyson Campbell at some point during the game this coming weekend.
And they need Savage back and healthy. He's key to this game as well. If he's not healthy, that's going to be a major issue. So here we see cover 1. This is a defense that the Jags run often 53% of the time. You see the man propensity here. So you see the middle linebacker plugging up the middle of the field with the free safety dropping in coverage to guard against anything deep. He has his hand full. Now, the problem here is if you bring that man watcher that you see kind of plugger in the middle of the field to guard Josh Allen in a one-on-one or in a spy situation, the middle of the field is completely open. It'd be worrisome for me with Dalton Kincaid and Khalil Shakir, 2 of the best separators, as well as Curtis Samuel, and what they're going to be able to do here. Now, do you leave him there to plug up the middle and kind of take some of that away, and Josh Allen is just going to have free rushing lanes across the field? it is going to be a challenge. Is Josh Allen going to run? He did not show the ability to run against Miami with that left hand injury. Hasn't limited him as a player, but it may limit him and his rushing ability. So Jacksonville's going to have to take their pick. Are they going to guard against the middle of the field, against crossers, against man beaters, or are they going to cover and zone watch a little bit into a quarterback spy, per se, into a Josh Allen situation, which is going to be their call. They're going to have to make that decision live, and they probably have a plan. They're going to have to adjust based on what they see from the Bills' offense. But it's going to be an interesting conundrum, because then also if you have a man spy, some of the best linebacking plays so far, I'm assuming it would be Devin Lloyd. But I mean, they could also use him in coverage against a Dalton Kincaid. So it's going to be an interesting matchup to see how they kind of parse that out a little bit. But Aluakon definitely seems to have more of the coverage responsibilities, playing 70% of cover, 70 coverage snaps total. So he's going to have the coverage. Maybe he has a Dalton Kincaid / crosser role. And then you're going to have to watch Lloyd, and you're going to take him out of the game with whatever Josh is doing. It's going to be challenged to run that cover one if he stays in it.
Yeah,
so,
I could see them running a little bit more cover 2 man, or even tilt the coverage a little bit, tilt the safeties a little bit to kind of disguise against Josh Allen. Maybe they have their strong safety. Maybe they have Darnell Savage playing quarterback contained. I mean, they could really do that. There's a strong possibility that could be the case, but I'm very intrigued to see this matchup. This is one of Ryan Nielsen's biggest tests as a defensive coordinator for the Jaguars. You know, he has had some good tests with Atlanta last year, but this one, it's Josh Allen. This is arguably the number 2 or number 3 best quarterback in football. So you're going to have to play your A game. If you're Ryan Nielsen, you're going to have to be a little bit creative, but if you want to, but also keep that discipline and integrity and man coverage intact. So I myself is very intrigued on the potential matchup this coming weekend.
Certainly. And you have
Jared,
what's interesting.
I have 2 questions.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. We might have had a little disconnect. But I have 2 questions. So number 1 here with the defensive line, I'm looking at Pro Football Reference, and Eric Armstead has played both games, but he hasn't started either one. So is this more of a rotation on the defensive line between Armstead, Roy Robertson, Harris, Jeremiah Ledbetter, and I think you mentioned Devon Hamilton? Because, I mean, Armstead was a guy, we were on Eric Armstead watch here. A lot of people want him. I believe his girlfriend went to UB, so we're trying to like match up the puzzle pieces. And then ultimately, you guys gave him a fat contract, and it's like, well, I don't know if the Bills really had the money for that. So is he getting like a lot of snaps for you guys?
He's getting plenty of snaps, but what Nielsen likes to do, he likes to rotate his defensive line a good bit. He like it, especially the interior, kind of keep the bodies fresh, kind of not exhaust them to an entire extent. So he really likes to rotate. So it's more of a guessing game of what they do defensively in terms of their defensive line rotation. Sometimes they start Tyler, they start Ledbetter and Armstead. Sometimes they start Hamilton and Lacey. You know, they do a lot of combinations in terms of who they play. I saw it a little bit in the preseason, their 3rd preseason game against Atlanta. So, you know, you're gonna get that a little bit of a mix and match with that defensive line. So I think it's definitely been successful over the last 2 weeks, considering how well they played defensively and also how much pressure they've been getting overall, just on film in general. So I've been very impressed with how that's gone. And Armstead should have an impact, but expect that defensive line to have a decent amount of contributors throughout the game.
And then my other question was, are you guys primarily a nickel defense, or are you 4-3? Because I'm looking at our lads, and they have Darnell Savage Jr. listed as a nickel back, but you guys were talking about him and how he's been dealing with that injury. So, again, are you guys primarily nickel, or will you switch to 4-3 and put someone like a Chad Muma in as that 3rd linebacker? Because the Jags official website has Muma, and it looks like it's a 4-3. So, like, what scheme do you run?
It's mainly a 4-2-5. That's mainly been Jacksonville's defense so far this season. They'll occasionally play with a true 4-3 front, but most of the time they're going to be out of nickel. And, you know, based on the depth chart I've seen on the Jaguars website, Savage is currently their starting strong safety, if I'm not mistaken. I got to double check on that real quick. But yeah, Savage is currently their starting strong safety. He'll also play nickel at times. I've seen Antonio Johnson playing that strong safety role too. So they'll rotate at nickel a little bit as well with some of their defensive backs. But mostly it's either been Savage or another defensive back. And, this is also makes still kind of learning a little bit about what this defense really is, and also knowing, okay, what does Nielsen do well and what he doesn't do well. And I've been very impressed with how he's been able to kind of just mix and match with the different pieces he has, especially with injuries.
Yeah, if you look at their snap count, you're going to get Ronald Darby and Montrick Brown on the outside of their boundary since Tyson Campbell is out. So you're going to see some Brown in there, who's played really well against the run, struggled a little bit in coverage based on some of his data, but has filled in nicely from a run stopping perspective. But then Jarrian Jones is definitely going to be currently taking up the majority of their slot snaps, 71 slot snaps from Jarrian Jones, with mixed results there. So, I mean, that may be why they tried Darnell Savage at time, who drops in because he's played 25 slot snaps. He's kind of played a little bit of everything, versatile, maybe coming in dime situations as well, maybe similar. They run a similar 4-2-5 as the Bills. They just play a lot of it in man. The Bills obviously play a lot of it in cover 2 or in quarters, in different styles of defense. Cisco's been a guy I've really liked his career. He has struggled this season. He's been a big hindrance to, in my opinion, in his free safety snaps. He's got 100 free safety snaps so far. He has struggled mightily in coverage, not too normal of Andre Cisco, a guy I think has taken a huge leap on, has been a huge part of that Jacksonville defense. So that's what the Bills are expecting to see. And then obviously you're going to get a little bit of Savage if he's healthy. And then obviously their other starting safeties, Antonio Johnson, who's been playing, like you mentioned, across the field. So that's the DB looks that you'll see from the Bills' perspective on who they may be looking at. And then obviously the 2 linebackers we've already talked about, and then that rotation at D-line that we've broken down a little bit too. The varying results there from each of those players. The front seven's playing extremely strong. There's definitely been some mishaps in the Jacksonville back 4, back 5, depending on the play. Majority of the time, like you mentioned, in that back 5. The safety play's been weak, though, according to metrics. Have you seen anything in your film review? Cisco's been a guy I just thought took that next level step, and he's struggled mightily, at least just in 2 games. I know it's against, you could say one of the best receivers in the league, couple receivers in the league in Miami. So that's probably going to inflate something, especially with those 2 explosives. But they've been having some issues when Tyson Campbell gone out. A steady presence from old Bills friend Ronald Darby, who's played some very solid boundary football, actually. Yeah. But outside of that, they've had some issues. What's going on at the safety position?
I haven't been really able to identify that closely enough. I've been very focused on Jacksonville's offensive issues, but whenever I have been able to turn on the film and just kind of look at that safety position, it has been inconsistent at times, and especially when you gave up those 2 explosive plays to Miami. But I think Cisco in the long run, he'll be fine. But I think just to start off the season, it's more just early season struggles, and then he turns it up during the season. I'm not too concerned with Cisco. I'd be kind of surprised if he did have a sharp decline after this season. And a question about James Cook versatility. I do think Jacksonville does have the linebackers, does have the 2nd level and 3rd level defenders to defend James Cook. Lloyd and Okun, they've been fantastic these past 2 weeks. So I don't have too much concern about their ability to cover James Cook, but Cook himself is a good running back, and he is quite versatile. And he was one of my favorite. I think he was my RB1 in 2022, correct? Yep. That was 2022. Yeah. Yep, 22. So Cook is someone that I've admired, and someone that I've been a big fan of in terms of just his overall skill set, and someone I think can be a very successful RB1 in this league. And he's been a very impactful running back so far for Buffalo. So Jacksonville's going to have their hands full, but I do believe they have the linebacker, the 2nd level defenders in Lloyd and Okun to defend him overall.
Yeah, they do. for sure. It's definitely not going to be pro. So if they drop, that's when they're going to, if they transition and get out of that cover one and get out of that man and drop to too high, now they're exposed to James Cook. If they don't do that as is, the Jags will be fine, in my opinion, against that would be one of the benefits to staying in their cover one.
And you're going to see a lot of coverage disguises. Nielsen's someone that does that really well. And I think you're going to see that decent bit this coming weekend against the Buffalo Bills. So, I have no doubts that Nielsen will be very disciplined. He'll be ready to go against this Bills offense. But again, my biggest concern with this team is for the Jaguars specifically, it's the offense and just the coaching, the communications, everything. That is my biggest concern. Yep. Very little concern with the defense at the moment, outside of a few injuries. But this is something that I'm still a little concerned about offensively.
Looks like we got some Wingard fans from Wyoming. Maybe old friend of Josh Allen at times. So he is definitely not playing right now. So he is, I don't know if he would be in their plans if he was, based on their rotation, but Andrew Wingard from Wyoming is on IR. I'm not sure. He has put some good film out at times. 27, he would probably didn't quite correlate with Josh Allen.
He'd definitely he'd be crucial depth for
be starting
the safety room. Yeah.
Especially with Savage going out at times, I would think.
Yeah,
so well.
I think with Savage being out, they definitely miss Wingard in his depth. But I thought they did all right on the back end overall against Cleveland.
Yeah, I agree. 12th man mafia in the house. That's right. It will be in Buffalo. Finally, they get Jacksonville at home. Sick of those 9-6 games down in Jacksonville or in London where every player got hurt Actually, the Bills got sent into a tailspin the last time they played Jacksonville after starting the season off extremely high.
I remember. Yeah.
But
that was also around the same time where Jacksonville also started their tailspin, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, they came out of that game okay. They started 8-3. So Jacksonville really had a really great start, went 1-6, and then obviously the 2 losses so far this season. But really going 8-3 almost was their playoff spot to lose, and they did lose it. But starting 8-3, yeah, I think the Bills win actually pushed them into their hot stretch before quickly coming into that cold stretch that we all have talked about. Obviously finishing 9-8. So I mean, 8-3 to 9-8, going 1-5, and then now 1-7. That's a tough one. Put any coach on notice.
Let's just say that the Jaguars don't have a lot of fans from their fans right now with their current play over the last probably 8 games. I would say decent amount. Yeah. So no. Yeah, 8 games. So
1-7.
Yeah. It's definitely let's just say this. I'd rather be, if I was a fan, I'd rather be in this situation than what Carolina's dealing with right now. So I'm glad that Buffalo is not playing Carolina as a Panthers fan. So glad we avoid Buffalo this season.
And Trevor Lawrence has a propensity to make those intermediate throws, as you mentioned earlier.
Yes,
in the show.
Absolutely.
And those are beaters. Those are beaters against the Bills defense, which a lot of quarterbacks can't make that throw, and they struggle against the Bills defense. They just can't make it. Trevor Lawrence can, and that's where he's had some success in his career against the Bills. I mean, notably just London, really. The 9-6 game was crazy, like back when the Bills were really good and Jags weren't. That was a crazy performance. Josh Allen didn't play well at all. And then Josh Allen at the time did. So that was kind of a crazy performance. The Bills Josh Allen's coming out party was a deep throw to Robert Foster from Alabama over the Jacksonville defense back with Leonard Fournette, where he fought Shaq Lawson in the fourth. They actually had a fight in the fourth quarter where they both got ejected. That's where Josh Allen's first threw an 80-yard dime, and people were like, all right, maybe he's actually really good at football. And then had like a 60-yard, 40 or 50-yard touchdown as well on the ground. And that was really, so there's some correlations here where the Bills have played really well at home and struggled mightily when they get Jacksonville on the road down there, including the playoffs. It wasn't Allen, it was Tyrod. And then into London where they did not play good at all. The sports science people had them flying in late. They thought that would be the best move. Jacksonville's obviously much in tune with London. The Bills were not. Jacksonville had a much better game. Daquan Jones, Matt Milano, all went out hurt, causing a tailspin for the Bills, who ended up rebounding very nicely. But the Jacksonville Jaguars have some history But at least the Bills have played them well when they get them in an environment up here in Buffalo. So we'll see what continues this week. But Jared, we really appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely.
We're going to ask you every time you get on the show, you got to give us a score prediction, what you think's going to happen. Wrap this all up for our listeners and give us an unbiased score prediction to end Monday Night Football and to end week 3.
So usually I don't do these score predictions for the Jaguars until Saturday, but I'm going to go ahead and give it. I believe Buffalo is going to put Jacksonville at 0-3 and put them in a very tough situation. I'm going to say 31-17. Buffalo wins. I do not have a lot of trust in this Jaguars offense. I think they're going to struggle this weekend.
Do you think they rebound against Houston week 4?
I don't know. I could see this team starting 0-4. And if that's the case, I could see Doug gone very soon. Like, it could get that bad.
Yeah, they said they expect the playoffs. Going 0-4 may be a hindrance, especially with on top of not just 0-4, but on top of the 1-5 last year. At some point, that combo, maybe you can get through one of those stretches, but you can't have both of those.
Clint Kubiak, 2025 Jacksonville Jaguars head coach.
Yeah, so maybe Peterson, if he does take the L, and Bills fans will be rooting for Jacksonville the rest of the year. We want Jags to beat Houston, like we so I think you'll see.
Houston's going to be a very fun team this year again. I mean, with Diggs, Buffalo plays Houston at some point
the following week. Yeah.
Oh, right
after the Jags. So they all have this. They have the same schedule. Miami, Houston. Like they're having the same schedule here to start the season. But right after just same thing again. Right after you play Miami, Jacksonville plays Miami. The Bills play Miami. Then right after Jacksonville plays Houston, the Bills play Houston the following
coincidence.
week. Yeah, it is. So very similar schedules because they're playing each other's divisions. So very similar schedules between the two teams. And they're to start the season, they're going to actually have almost mirroring schedules. So there's going to be a lot of crossover this season. But if Jacksonville loses to not only Cleveland, Miami, Buffalo, and Houston, that's 4 playoff teams potentially. Miami and Cleveland might be fighting for one of those spots. But ultimately, that's playoff positioning. They're losing not only with 4 AFC losses, 4 head-to-head losses. I mean, at some point, it's different than losing NFC games. Like you're not going to be able to rebound from that very easily.
And I if my prediction is true, I do hope that Monday night does expose the issues that they're having offensively and coaching wise, because I don't think a lot of people understand what's really going on with Jacksonville right now. It's not looking too great.
And we got similar people predicting similar. Houston October 6th. That's right. Similar predictions in the audience, and I think you're right. We'll see if you're right, or if Peterson puts on a masterclass and gets on the winning side of the record. Super hard schedule, though. I will give Jacksonville that. Like that is not a fun schedule. Miami, Cleveland's defense, Buffalo, Houston. Man, going 2-2 is what was needed. 1-3 maybe survivable. But 0-4, that's a tough way to start any football season for sure.
Yeah,
that's
you can basically just call off the playoffs. I mean, at that rate,
4 AFC losses. I mean, you'd have to play perfect
to come
football
back from, unless you're like
perfect.
The what was it? Houston Oilers from back in '93, where they started 1-5.
Yeah, 1-5. 1-5 was it 1-5? Yeah,
I think it was 1-5. Maybe.
Yeah,
maybe my history's off.
It was 0-5 or 1-5. You are correct.
One of those things. Yeah.
But 0-4 is almost historically unprecedented to come back from that.
Yeah.
You wouldn't need like Houston collapsing, essentially some major problems there. You would have to win the division. And you never know. Like football's crazy now with the extra game. So Jared, what's going on? What do you got working on? Tell our viewers again, last month we had you on, but tell us where we can find you, what you got working on, and we'll get you on out of here. We appreciate you coming on here for over an hour now.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love coming on here with you guys talking about Jags, Panthers football if I can. Looking forward to hopefully future matchups on this podcast as well. But you guys can find me on X and on Threads at JRod NFL Drafts. You can also find my content over at the Jaguars Wire and the Panthers Wire. I do content for both sites. My next couple pieces for especially for Panthers Wire, I got a mailbag coming out talking about Andy Dalton now starting for the Carolina Panthers after Bryce Young was benched, and also some key matchups to look out for Jaguars and Bills, which I'll be working on tomorrow and hopefully comes out Friday.
There you have it. And the Bills visit Bank of America Stadium next year to face the Panthers finally in another crossover game. So you will get Jared next year as well. I don't know if these teams will match up in the playoffs at the Bills and the Jags, and we may not see Jared again until some point next year. And I don't think they will play the Jags unless they match up in the seedings, which could happen, I guess. Something could happen.
You never know. Like you said, any given Sunday.
The seasons could correlate there. So we'll definitely get you on next year for sure. If not, maybe they come all the way back into like a 2-7 playoff game. Very possible. Something like that could happen. And we would get Jared on again, potentially in January. But Jared, thank you so much for popping on here and giving us 60-70 minutes of your time.
Absolutely, man.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Jared. So lots of knowledge there from Jared, Kevin. What are your initial reactions off of some of the breakdowns and what you expect to see from the Jags this weekend?
I think this is the ultimate trap game. I mean, This is going back to the EJ Manuel days where the Bills just always seem to lay that egg against Jacksonville. So I really hope that doesn't come to fruition because, as we talked about with Jared, I think the Jaguars are going to be pretty desperate because you do not want to go to 0-3 with the Houston Texans looming in the near future. That is, I think Jared said it, it's like a death trap. So I think we're going to get the best version of Jacksonville.
Think you are. I think Ingram's key to this is stupid, is silly, but like he's a key beater of what I think the Bills defense does. And the Bills have had some issues a little bit with Jonnu Smith. They didn't care about it because they were too busy guarding their actual skill players. But Jonnu Smith, they played well against Trey McBride, to your point earlier. So we'll see with Evan Ingram. Jacksonville doesn't need to play perfect football. They just need to play really good football, control the game, watch what Arizona did in the first half, kind of put their version of that with the ball control. And they don't need to score 34 points necessarily, but they do need to do what Arizona did in the first half, control the ball, get some type of early turnover to at least give yourself a chance to be up 7, 10, 14 against Josh Allen. Because if you're not, it's going to be a long day. But Kevin, on the Bills side, though, that man defense would scare the heck out of me if I'm Jacksonville. They need to get out of that. Ultimately, it's been a major problem. The only benefit you have to that cover one defense is if you bring the heat like we saw Miami try to do in the playoffs with the cover zero blitzes. Maybe there's a chance there, but Josh Allen has a positive EPA against the blitz and against pressure. It's going to be a long day, man. They got to hope that Josh Allen can't run with that left hand because it's going to be there. They may bait Josh to run because if you're running a cover one and a lot of man-to-man, it's going to be so many rushing lanes. Josh has got to take it. It's one of the games against this defense I want to see him run. That may not be the case against Houston next week, but when it comes to in Buffalo against the Jags, against man defense, all of those things combined equal, like, we need Josh Allen's legs.
I agree, but I think that I want to see Josh Allen's arm outshine everything else this week because, we talked about this with Jared, and I actually tweeted it while we were talking here. So look at these stats. The Jaguars' defensive ranks, they are 30th against the pass, averaging almost 250 yards per game. They are 11th against the run and 22nd total. So if I'm the Bills, I'm trying to open up the passing game because, as I noted here, Khalil Shakir, Dalton Kincaid, and Keon Coleman only have 20 targets combined so far this season. Curtis Samuel, Mac Hollins, and MVS only have 10. So the Bills have been, maybe I shouldn't say run heavy, but I believe they have run 57% of the time. Josh Allen has only dropped back 42 times. And as we noted, Josh only ran twice against the Dolphins for 2 yards. So I think this is a week where you can kind of test that weakened Jaguars secondary. Ronald Darby's their CB1. Tyson Campbell's out. They're banged up back there. Andrew Wingard, we talked about him with Jared. I really think that this is a week where Joe Brady can try to open things up a bit, try to get Kincaid going, try to get Coleman going. Maybe we can see a little bit more from Curtis Samuel. I thought we were going to get a bigger game from him last week in Miami. We ultimately didn't need it. James Cook had a great game, but I just think that this is a week where maybe Josh can push the ball down the field a little bit more.
There you have it. We'll see. It's all coverage dependent, man. Like if they clog up the middle of the field to take away those throws, because they know they're seeing Josh Allen and are baiting Josh to run. That's my prediction. Of course, I want to see Josh's arm. I'm like 100%. But I'm just factoring in their defense of playing a lot of that strong front four football with a really good coverage that they tried to play. And then instead of focusing in on making sure Josh doesn't run, taking away some of the crossers and tried their best to double Samuel or Shakir. More important, probably Shakir right now. Some of those lanes could be clogged in a wide open running lane. So it's going to be on the Bills to see if Josh is too committed to throwing. I don't want to see turnovers. Where if they can get him to run the ball at least early to get him out of that, that's my goal. And then to dominate in the second half through the air. That's kind of what I'm seeing. But hey, maybe they come out and play that cover 2 high shell. None of this would matter. I don't know what Ryan Nielsen and the Jags are going to amount to, but they play the amount of man that they cover and they play is going to equal eons of rushing lanes. And if it wasn't for Josh's hand, you could see a 60 to 70 yard rushing day easily.
What about James Cook? Because he has been phenomenal so far, coming off the AFC Player of the Week, getting in against the Dolphins. We're used to having it be Josh Allen, but this time it was James Cook with his 3 touchdowns, and he's been doing it on the ground and in the air. But as I noted with that stat, the Jaguars are 11th in the NFL in run defense. So I know that they are more susceptible to giving up those longer yards in the air. And to your point, with Josh Allen using his legs, I guess let me ask you this. Would you rather have it be a Josh Allen game or a James Cook game?
Josh Allen game. I just think everything amounts to it being a Josh Allen game between the statistics, the way they play, their defense. They're pretty decent against the run. If they don't play a lot of 2 cover, like where the Bills haven't been wildly successful running the ball, according to EPA, they've been wildly successful against Josh Allen making the right read in a cover 2 high shell to giving the ball to James Cook. James Cook hasn't made exceptional plays that he shouldn't have been making. Josh Allen's making the right read in a cover 2 high shell and giving James Cook the best ability to succeed, which he has succeeded. So I think that we'll see what happens in week 3 to where how is the data going to result in, is it James Cook? I think with their strong linebackers and their strong front 4, so the 6 players that they'll have, and then they're getting decent run stop out of the nickel, kind of like the Bills, that I think the winnable matchup, to your point, is the receivers. And then if they're clogging that up, the final winnable matchup is definitely Josh Allen running. They won't have an answer to it playing man. There's just not going to be anybody there. And if Josh makes one man miss, you're talking about 40-yard chunk plays because it's one-on-one with a free safety trying to tackle Josh Allen 10 yards, 15 yards down the field, which has not had a lot of success in this league right now. He's jumped over a majority of them. So not that he's going to do that this weekend, but there's definitely going to be some challenges for Jacksonville's defense. Maybe they just come out and run a cover 2 high shell, make the Bills nickel and dime them. That's what I would do. Ultimately, if I was a defensive coordinator against Mahomes or Allen, and a lot of times they will be successful, and a lot of times, sometimes they won't. But I'm running a cover 2 high shell. I'm making you make James Cook be useful. I have good linebacking play. That's how I would play the Bills. Make Josh get bored, which he hasn't been bored in a while. He's played really good football. But I'm going to hope that he gets bored and tries to fit in a throw against a cover 2 high shell, against a honey pot or a honey hole that he shouldn't be throwing. But yeah, I mean, this could make sense too. More Ray Davis against the Jags front 4 makes sense on a matchup. Maybe that's not true, but on paper, it could make sense too. So we'll see how that all amounts to everything. But anyways, Kevin, it's not.
I was just saying on the flip side, I was going to talk about the Bills' defensive game plan. Is that where you were going?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So I just want to say real quick, let me reiterate because I talked about this with Jared. But I think, first of all, it starts up front. If Greg Rousseau and Von Miller can continue to get pressure, because the Jaguars' offensive line is weakened this year. They're just very underwhelming. They're not performing that well. Old friend Mitch Morse. So if the Bills can start by winning up front, I think that's huge because they are weakened across the middle with no Milano, no Bernard, no Taron Johnson. McDermott has already ruled those guys out. Yep. So you're going to be rocking with Dorian Williams, Balin Spector, Jamarcus Ingram playing some dime packages, maybe Cam Lewis in the slot. Maybe we get a little bit of Nicholas Morrow. So I think that the Bills are pretty solid on that defensive line and on the back end because I really like what I've seen from Rasul Douglas and Christian Benford. So I think that they will be able to, maybe I shouldn't say lock up Brian Thomas Jr. and Gabe Davis, but I think that Douglas has the experience over BTJ and Benford knows all of Gabe Davis's tricks or lack thereof because he's a one-trick pony. So I think they can take away that. My key to the game here for the Bills defense is take away the middle of the field, specifically with Christian Kirk, because he could be Trevor Lawrence's favorite target. He only has 2 catches for 29 yards so far on the young season, and this could be the game where Press Taylor really tries to amp him up and get him going. I'll throw Travis Etienne in there too with those swing passes. So you just have to make sure that you can get out, cover those flats, cover the middle of the field, and I think you'll be okay.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, the Bills have done a really good job at confusing their opponents. They disguise coverage at the top of the league. To Jared's point earlier, he mentioned the Jags disguising coverage. Right now, they're not doing a good job at it. They're bottom 2 in disguising coverages. They're running too much man. They're running too much cover 1, where the Bills will notice that. They're either running cover 1 or they're in a too high shell. Like they've been running literally 2 formations defensively. So that's not going to be too confusing for a top end quarterback. Maybe they just thought that was the best way to confuse Deshaun Watson. I don't know. But ultimately, when it comes from a Bills perspective defensively, they're going to run a lot of that dime. They're definitely going to put a precedent on Kevin attacking those tackles. I put it up on the screen earlier. They stink. They've played some pretty bad football. They need to play much better, and they're capable of it possibly. And if they do, Jacksonville has a better chance offensively. If they keep playing like they have been, Rousseau and Von Miller actually get some statistics in this game. And then something that's beaten the Bills a little bit so far is that quarterback run. They usually are pretty good against it. Kyler Murray had a good success against it. And then so did a little bit Tua, normally not running, but some of their most successful plays were 2 or 3 Tua runs in the game, which you don't see too often. One, unfortunately, he got hurt on, but it was still a really good play by Tua to see it and get yards and to fight for his team. So when you look at it from that perspective, Trevor Lawrence has had some big runs. He's sneaky athletic. Bills have to watch that unfold. But when it comes to a coverage standpoint, I think they're going to be in good position. The Bills know Gabe Davis. They've done really well against Marvin Harrison Jr., and I expect that to continue to a similar coverage against Brian Thomas Jr. They know what Gabe Davis's pros and cons are, so I'm not too worried there. They need to get Christian Kirk going. If they can't, I just don't see where the weapon would come in for the Jags to win, especially if Ingram is out. Brenton Strange is a serviceable tight end, backup tight end. He is pretty decent, a solid number 2 tight end in this league. But behind that, they're running out, Parker Washington and Devin Duvernay and Tim Jones. There's not a ton there. And behind Etienne, if Bigsby can't go, it's Dearness Johnson. So there's not a lot of weapons. It's very top heavy, this roster. Kind of reminds me of those old Bills rosters that were really, really top heavy. That didn't have too much to go. So that's where we're at, Kevin. What are any final takeaways from these matchups?
I was going to say, I'll leave you with this. I said it before. I'll say it again. Through the first 2 weeks, the Bills had held Marvin Harrison Jr., Trey McBride, Tyreek Hill, and Jalen Waddle to under 100 yards combined. So, yeah, the Jaguars present a new challenge. We're going to see a desperate Jaguars team. They don't want to fall to 0-3, and it's that classic Jacksonville trap game. But that stat right there should give you all the confidence in the world going into Monday Night Football.
There you have it. Time for score predictions and leading us into our final segment, score predictions. Kevin, we're going to start with you. What's going to happen here?
No, I'm actually very similar to what Jared said, because I was also thinking along the 31-17 line. So I guess I'll go with that, maybe 31-16, just to give it a little bit of variation. But I think the Bills are going to score 30 again, because let's not forget, for an offense that people didn't really know a lot about going into the season, like they're averaging 32.5 points or something like that. So I think they will get 30 again. And I just don't see the Jaguars offense necessarily coming together against Sean McDermott's defense. So as much as they scare me, and I have all these flashbacks and PTSD to EJ Manuel and Tyrod Taylor and, Urban Meyer 6-9. Like, what? How did the Bills drop that game? But I think this is the game where the Bills finally get on top of Jacksonville and they improve to 3-0. So I'm going to go 31-16.
There you have it. So you're very, very similar. I think it's going to be a little bit lower scoring than that. I think there's going to be some good defense in this football game. We'll see if that's right or wrong. But a number that's been sticking out to me over the past few weeks in this game specifically has been 23-13 Buffalo. That's a number that I think that sticks out to me. Buffalo wins 23-13. I just think that the Bills are going to be able to do enough to limit the Jacksonville offense. It just hasn't been good. And to Jared's point that I take a lot from, can the Bills, like they did the Dolphins, can the Bills expose some of these issues that are going on within the building that haven't been seen nationally yet? We'll see if anyone can do it. Sean McDermott can actually bring out some more issues with that Jacksonville offense. That's telling to me that there's definitely some issues. The Bills had some offensive issues last year that the numbers weren't pointing to with Dorsey, and many arguments for many weeks with Dorsey. And finally, they were exposed Monday Night Football against Denver. So will that be the case again? Monday Night Football against Jacksonville for Jacksonville's offense remains to be seen, with definitely making a decision. Will Press Taylor be there long-term or not? I think it could be an easy scapegoat early on and he's young. He kind of reminds me of Brady in terms of having a tough go, his first go around. But he's been there a few years now. Could this be it for him at some point? I think they could do a similar Brady move going into someone from there, into their organization to make a move. But that's it, man. We appreciate everybody tuning in for an hour and 30 plus. We had some great stuff from Jared. To our show sponsors, the Summit Center and Larson-Timko, smash that like button. Thank you so much for being on here. We're looking forward to being back at you next week, talking about the 0-2 Ravens. That's going to be an interesting one on Sunday Night Football now. So definitely the Bills, just like Jacksonville wants to go to 1-2. The Bills are wanting to go to 3-0 to give themselves some breathing room against some of these strong opponents into their quote unquote tough stretch. We're looking at the 0-2 Ravens. You're looking at the 1-1 Jets. But then before that, you got the 2-0 Texans in the middle. So definitely some teams all across the board and varying levels of success so far. So we'll have to see how the stretch runs. But going into the 3-0 into the stretch run certainly puts the Bills in a place where, many people thought they'd be 1-2, 2-1, especially with some of these goofy offseason predictions. So being 3-0 through this stretch will certainly be a nice little surprise as they get into then from there. The Titans game, the Seahawks, Dolphins again. We'll see if Tua's playing, the Colts. There's definitely some winnable games in there, but none of these stretches are great. Kevin, any final parting thoughts for our viewers?
Yeah. Now this comes after watching week 2 of football. And it started with Jordan Poyer getting dusted by James Cook on that long touchdown run that he had. I believe it was a 49-yarder. Poyer just took a bad angle and he got lost in the shuffle and Cook just shot past him. So I saw that originally. And now, to be fair, I didn't watch this game because I was working, but I did catch up through Twitter and through fantasy. I was watching my fantasy team. And then I saw the highlights afterwards of the Cardinals-Rams. And I saw that Trey White got beaten coverage a lot, and he gave up a lot of touchdowns. Now, one of those, it was like a 7 or 8 second play where Kyler Murray just extended the play with his legs. So to be fair, I mean, some of those were tough plays, but it hurts to see Trey White get beaten coverage like that. And my general takeaway was that between Poyer getting dusted and Trey White getting beat multiple times to allow touchdowns, last weekend was a good reminder that the Bills needed to get younger, no matter how beloved those players were. So props to Brandon Beane for being a smart GM and ripping the Band-Aid off, because to be honest, I don't know if I could have done that, because that takes a lot of guts to be able to say, you know what, you are past your prime. You're coming off these injuries. We need to get younger and more athletic. And I mean, you're seeing it come to fruition. Gabe Davis, Mitch Morse, the Bills will be playing on Monday night. They cut ties with a lot of those players. And as hard as it was back in March, I think we're starting to see the fruits of that labor coming to fruition now. So a lot of respect to Brandon Beane. And actually, it's kind of funny because this comes full circle, because one of the first times he did that was getting rid of Ronald Darby, who the Bills will now be lining up against Monday night.
Yeah, so it is full circle for the Bills. Maybe McDermott and Beane know how to build a defense, know what they're looking for, know how to find DBs, know how to make this defense something. We'll see if they can be successful. The most number one thing right now, everything else is ticking on all cylinders for me. Can they get out of the linebacker room before Milano in December and Bernard at some point in October? So maybe middle October for him. And then
Taron Johnson too.
Yeah, I think they've already proven they can get away from Taron with what they're able to coach. But can they survive both Milano and Bernard being off the field with someone who's oft injured in some of us didn't have making it to the team, and Balin Spector and Dorian Williams, who has some coverage issues, but they seem to be disguising it fine. Olafoshio should be active, or will they go with Buffalo Joe Andreessen this weekend? Probably Olafoshio, but remains to be seen which way they go with Nicholas Morrow. Guys? Could be, but will they go with Olafoshio, their draft choice, or Buffalo Joe Andreessen to back up the two starters and then Nicholas Morrow? So they'll need a fourth linebacker active on game days to help out. So we'll see which way they go with that. So the inactives for me, I always like to try to predict them. I don't think they need to make any call-ups this week. Probably Javon Solomon is out, but you're going to see, unless Casey Toohill can't go, but you're going to see Casey Toohill probably ready to go, as well as maybe the Dewan Smoot first game of the season. So that'd be a nice little tiny boost to the defensive line. So I'm going with Vandemark, Solomon, both being inactive, as well as obviously, you're going to inactivate Taron Johnson, and you're going to have an active
Bernard.
Yeah. Depending on if they go on IR or not, or what the situation is going to be there, how that's going to end up playing out for them as well. And then Olafoshio or Joe Andreessen. So I'm going to say Joe Andreessen for now, just because Olafoshio was the draft pick, but that's my 5 inactives. Taron Johnson, being on there. So unfortunately not having to go to the IR list. So that's the 5 inactives. My prediction, I think the team's fairly healthy minus the 3 big injuries across the board. Otherwise, they have been healthy. But thanks so much for everybody tuning in for this hour and 40 minutes. Smash that like button for us. We'll be back at you next week with some Baltimore Ravens and some recaps of this Monday night game. I'm Kevin. That's Kevin. We appreciate everybody tuning in from the Going Deep Buffalo Show. We'll see you guys next Wednesday.
Go Bills.